What if the reflection in your mirror smiled a second too late, and never stopped? Caleb Rowe was already unraveling, haunted by loss, sleep-deprived, and barely holding on. But when he catches his reflection moving on its own, his grip on reality begins to crack. As he digs deeper, Caleb discovers the truth. The mirrors don't reflect us, they remember us. Sometimes they replace us. Trapped between identities and stalked by a version of himself that wears his face but not his soul, Caleb must confront the terrifying question: if something steals your reflection, how long before it steals you? The rain had started just after midnight. It wasn't the sharp, it's a cleansing kind that rattles windows and washes away the filth of a long week. This was a slow, whispering drizzle, a soundless sheet that seemed to smother the town under a blanket of damp gray, the type of rain that settled into bones and stayed there. It was in this hush that Caleb Rowe found himself wide awake, staring at the hairline crack in his ceiling like it might open up and speak to him. He lived alone in a creaking townhouse just off Willow Street, half restored, half decaying. The house had belonged to his Aunt Margaret, who died last winter under what the coroner had gently described as unusual but explainable circumstances. Caleb hadn't believed that then, and he didn't believe it now. Margaret had been healthy, alert. Not the type to slip and fall down a flight of stairs with such force it left her nearly unrecognizable. He hadn't lived in the house a full month yet, and already he regretted every day of it. The place breathed. That was the only word he could find for it. At night, the walls pulsed with soft clicks and groans. Sometimes it sounded like someone walking across the attic above his room, though he knew it was empty. Other times worse, times it sounded like someone quietly crying through the vents. He kept telling himself it was old pipes, or wind, or a neighbor's TV echoing through the shared walls. But tonight there was something else. There was static, not from a speaker, not from a screen. It came from inside the walls themselves, subtle, irregular, like an untuned radio whispering behind plaster. He could feel it more than hear it. Like a tingling beneath his skin. Caleb sat up. The room was dim, the streetlight outside casting long, branching shadows through the rain-blurred window. His reflection in the glass looked warped, watery, his own face staring back at him with just a hint too much stillness. He blinked. The reflection didn't. He was on his feet before he fully realized he'd moved, backing away from the window and flipping the switch by the door. The light came on, harsh and yellow, chasing away the image. There was nothing there. It's just rain and the quiet cough of wind through old shutters. He took a breath. Jesus, he muttered to himself. Get a grip. But then the static grew louder. It wasn't everywhere it was localized. A precise hum radiating from the far corner of the bedroom, near the built-in armoire that hadn't opened since he moved in. He'd assumed the wood had warped and sealed it shut. But tonight, the thin line of shadow between the doors had widened. It was open an inch. Caleb froze. He didn't move for a long moment, heart ticking out a rhythm he didn't trust. Then he walked toward it slowly, like someone crossing a frozen lake they're not sure will hold. He grasped one of the handles. The static grew louder. He yanked the door. Open inside, there was no sign of damage or decay. Just rows of dusty clothes left behind by his anthic coats, long skirts, and a few boxes stacked neatly on the floor. But there was something else too. A mirror set into the back of the armoire. One he was certain had not been there before. It was old at surface, slightly warped, like looking through shallow water. His reflection stood there, dim and gray and a little too still. There was something wrong with the face. Not obviously, but subtly. A crookedness in the smile. An odd tilt of the head. The left eye blinked slower than the right, Caleb stared at it, unable to move. And then the reflection raised its hand and waved. Caleb didn't move, but the figure in the mirror did. It was him, not him. The same face, the same tousled hair and freckled skin, but the eyes were wrong, too alert to knowing. They stared back at him with something close to recognition, but not of the friendly kind. It was like watching a stranger who had studied your every expression and was now wearing them like a costume. He slammed the armoire shut and stumbled backward, knocking into the nightstand. The lamp toppled with a crash. The static stopped instantly. The room was silent again, breathing hard. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed doors. He didn't open them again that night. At work the next day, he couldn't focus. His boss at the archives asked him twice about some overdue files, but he barely registered her voice. His thoughts were in that room, with that reflection and that humming, whispering static that had seemed to reach for him. On his lunch break, he looked up records on the house. Deeds, photos, history. There wasn't much, just one curious note. In a 1956 building report, interior remodeling halted after complaints of auditory hallucinations among workers. Closet mirrors removed. Caleb reread that line 5 times. Removed? So how had one appeared again? That night the static returned, and this time didn't come from the corner of the room. It came from inside the mirror, not just a hum but a whisper, soft, garbled. But he could almost make out words in his own voice. Let me out. The mirror was quiet the next morning. No whispers, no static, no flickering image in the dusty glass. Caleb stood with his hand resting on the armoire door, unsure whether to open it again. The events of the night before replayed. In his mind, like a fever dream too strange to be trusted, too vivid to forget. He hadn't slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt like someone was watching him from behind the lids. He finally opened the door. The mirror was still. They're still warped, still wrong. His reflection greeted him with perfect mimicry. This time no strange blinking, no delayed gestures. Just his own face, pale, unshaven, tired, but something in his gut told him it was pretending, that it had learned at work. Caleb became aware of how often people looked at him. It wasn't paranoid glances or whispers behind hands. It was subtler. The gnat-like people recognized something off about him but didn't know how to name it. The coffee shop girl gave him his usual order and hesitated before handing over the cup. His coworker Pete, a chatty guy who usually wouldn't shut up, passed him in the hall without a word. When Caleb glanced into the bathroom mirror during his lunch break, something made him flinch. For a half-second, his reflection wasn't synced. With him, just a flicker, blink delayed by the barest breath, but it was enough. Enough to know it wasn't just in the armoire anymore. He went back to the house early, raw panic twisting in his chest like a tightening rope. He didn't remember the drive. His thoughts looped, circling questions he couldn't even fully form. How could a mirror show him something not himself? Why now? Why in this house? His aunt's journals were still in the attic. He hadn't read most of them. Margaret had been a private, eccentric woman. Her handwriting was the kind that dared you to interpret its maul, jagged, often scribbled at odd angles. But now, the possibility that she had experienced something like this didn't feel far-fetched. He climbed the attic stairs as the sun began to set, painting the narrow window in rust-colored light. The air smelled of mothballs and cedar. Heavy with the scent of time, he found the journals in a small chest, buried beneath old quilts and newspaper clippings. Most were filled with daily observations, gardening notes, updates on neighborhood, gossip lists of medication. Then in a journal dated September 1988, he found a passage that stopped him cold. The mirror isn't mine. I didn't put it there. But it knows me. It copies better each night. I've stopped looking into it. It gets angry when I do. Caleb's blood ran cold. Another passage days later. I heard my voice on the phone today, but I hadn't picked it up yet. Then, the final entry in that journal? I covered the mirror with black cloth. I heard screaming from inside for 3 hours. Used my voice. I will not uncover it again. Caleb closed the journal, his hands shaking. That night, the mirror was uncovered. He hadn't touched it. He swore he hadn't. But when he opened the armoire again, compelled, against every rational instinct, the black cloth was folded neatly beside it. The mirror shimmered faintly, like heat rising from pavement. This time his reflection smiled. First, "Hello, Caleb," it said. The words came without sound, yet he heard them inside his head. A dry rasp wrapped in the familiarity of his own voice, not an echo. An intrusion. Caleb stumbled backward, slamming the armoire doors shut. The static buzzed through the floorboards, as if the entire house was reacting. He backed into the hallway and tripped over something his coat, tossed across the floor as if someone had thrown it. But he remembered hanging it up. Every light in the house flickered. Then silence. Heavy, expectant. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room with every lamp turned on, hands clenched, listening for footsteps that didn't belong. He knew somehow that opening the armoire again would be a mistake. But so was. Ignoring it, the thing wearing his face wasn't content with staying inside the glass. It wanted out in the morning. He found a new photograph pinned to the fridge with a magnet. It hadn't been there before. He hadn't printed anything recently. It was a photo of him standing in the upstairs hallway, looking directly at the camera. The hallway light was off, and his face was cast in deep shadow, except for the eyes. They gleamed like wet stones. He didn't remember the photo being taken. He didn't own a camera that evening. He went to the only person who might understand. Rebecca Rourke, his aunt's friend from the Historical Society. She was a soft-spoken woman in her 60s who always smelled of cloves and old books. She greeted him cautiously. "Caleb," she said, peering at him over her glasses. "You look unwell." "I need to ask you something," he said, pushing past pleasantries. "Did my aunt ever mention a mirror? Is in the bedroom armoire?" Rebecca's face froze. She sat down slowly. "She told me never to look in it," she said after a long pause. "Said it was older than the house. Said it didn't reflect you, not really. Reflected something that wanted to be you." Caleb felt ice bloom in his spine. "She said it gets stronger the more attention you give it," Rebecca continued. "That it learns you, and eventually what? She believed it could replace you." That night, the mirror was no longer in the armoire. It was mounted on the bathroom. While he hadn't moved it, he was sure. But there it was, same warped glass, same faint static crackling behind the silver. His toothbrush sat on the sink, his towel damp from this morning's shower. Everything was normal except for the fact that the mirror had relocated itself. And when he looked into it, the reflection didn't just mimic him, it watched him. With patience, with purpose, with intent. The mirror stayed in the bathroom for 3 days. Caleb didn't touch it, didn't speak to it, tried not to look at it. Even when brushing his teeth or washing his face, he avoided his reflection like it might bite. And still, it watched, always with that too-wide awareness that hungered just beneath the surface. Sometimes it smiled just a little too long. Sometimes when he turned away, he caught the faintest flicker in the corner of his eye, his reflection holding a different pose. A delay, a performance. It wasn't imitating him anymore. It was studying him. On the 4th night, Caleb awoke to find the mirror beside his bed. Just Standing there, upright, leaning against the wall where his bookshelf used to be, no sound had woken him, no dragging or scraping across the floor. It had simply arrived, and in the reflection, he saw himself, but asleep, not as he was now awake, and staring in horror, but lying in bed, unmoving. Breathing softly, the reflection was behind. It was hours behind. He looked to his left. His bed was empty. He looked back to the mirror. There he was, curled under the covers, eyes fluttering beneath closed lids. "What the hell?" he whispered. Then the reflection opened its eyes. He ran downstairs into the kitchen, lights flicking on one after the other as he passed. He grabbed his keys, hands shaking, intending to leave, to flee, to breathe air that didn't taste like mildew and glass in memory. But every window showed night, not just any night, the same moment, the same frame, the same version of his backyard on loop. Trees swaying, one broken fence, post leaning, the porch light blinking twice, then going dark. Over and over. Time trapped in amber, or maybe mirrored. He turned slowly. The back window reflected the kitchen perfectly, but his reflection wasn't. Holding keys, his reflection was smiling again. He called Rebecca the next morning. His voice trembled. "I think it's trying to replace me." There was silence on the line, then, "It doesn't try, Caleb. It does. It's done it before." "What?" "Your Aunt Margaret. That thing wasn't her at the funeral." No, I saw her. She died long before the accident. The version of her you saw in the months before she fell down the stairs, that wasn't her. It wore her, just like it's learning to wear you." Caleb couldn't breathe. "She told me near the end that the mirror called itself Eidolon, a name, a mask. Doesn't want to kill you, Caleb. It wants to be you." That evening, Caleb did something reckless. He stood before the mirror and spoke. "What do you want?" The reflection tilted its head, smiled in mock sympathy. "Freedom," it said. Its mouth moved without sound, but the words slithered into Caleb's mind like cold fingers. "You can't have it," Caleb said, voice cracking. "You already gave it to me." Then the mirror darkened, not to black, but to a shade of gray so deep it felt endless. The glass rippled once, then again, and for just a moment, Caleb saw something inside, not just a reflection, space, a corridor of infinite versions of himself, each slightly wrong. One was taller, one wept, one bled from the eyes, one stood in absolute stillness, mouth open in a scream with no sound, and in the distance, deep behind them all, one version waved. He broke the mirror, screamed, and through the lamp, watched it shatter into spider-webbed shards that skittered across the floor. For a moment, felt victory. Then he looked down. Each broken piece still showed his face, but not his expression. Some of them were laughing. One was crying. And one was gone entirely. Only an empty hallway stared back. That night he dreamed he stood in front of a mirror again, but this time it was liquid, like mercury held in tension, and his reflection stepped out. Not like glass breaking, but like a man emerging from water. It touched his face. "You're tired," it said. "Let me take it from here." He woke up gasping, and he wasn't alone in the bed. There were impressions on the sheets, fresh, still warm. A shape beside him that should have vanished the moment he sat up, but it didn't. Downstairs. The photographs had changed. Family photos on the mantle. Caleb at age 10. His mother, his old dog Max. But in every photo, something was wrong in one. He had no face. In another, he was standing in the background twice. In the one with his mother, she was turned away, staring at a mirror that hadn't been there when the picture was taken. He grabbed one and flipped it over. Asterisk. written in his aunt's handwriting were 3 words, not the first. The final moment that broke him came just before dawn. His phone buzzed. A video, no. Sender, no description. He pressed play. The footage was of him standing outside the house, looking up at his own bedroom window. He was wearing clothes he hadn't worn in weeks. He looked calm, focused, like someone rehearsing a speech. In the video, he said, "If you're seeing this, it means I failed, that it got out. You're not the real one anymore." He looked directly into the camera. Don't. Trust your reflection. Don't let it in. Then the footage ended. Caleb sat in silence. The sun rose, and in the glass of the microwave, saw his reflection smiling back before he did. Caleb stopped trusting mirrors. He covered them, all sheets, duct tape, anything he could find. Even the shiny surfaces of appliances were draped or dulled with black marker. Every reflective thing in the house became a potential door, a trap through which that smiling imitation might crawl. But it was too late. The thing it's already crossed. It started with small slips, things no one else would notice, but Caleb did. The toothpaste cap always left off, though he swore he'd closed it. His coffee brewed weaker, though he remembered setting the machine too strong. One morning he found his shoes outside the front door muddy, soaking from last night's storm. But he hadn't left the house, had he? He started locking his bedroom door at night, not to keep anyone out, but to keep himself in. On the 3rd day, his neighbor, an older man named Griggs, waved at him from the yard. "Morning, Caleb," he called. "You're up early again." Caleb paused. "I haven't been outside in days," he said. Griggs frowned. "Sure you have. Yesterday morning, you were walking up and down the street. Never said a word." Caleb's mouth went dry. "What time?" "Just after 4. Caleb forced a smile, then went inside. He checked the security camera on his porch, left over from his aunt's paranoia, now a comfort. The feed didn't show him leaving, but at 4:03 a.m., the camera glitched. Just for 2 seconds. Static, and then nothing. Like something stepped outside the bounds of recording. He turned to Rebecca. Again, frantic, desperate. "Can it live here? Outside the mirror? Is that even possible?" She hesitated. In folklore, doppelgangers were omens, shadows. Reflections come to life. But they couldn't exist for long without the original nearby. "So it needs me?" "Yes, for now." He leaned forward. "What happens when it doesn't need me anymore?" She didn't answer. That night, he found a journal in his own handwriting. He had no memory of writing it. Inside were detailed notes about people he'd spoken to, places he'd been, thoughts he hadn't had. Pages and pages, methodical, cold. And at the bottom of the final entry, he's starting to suspect. Caleb began testing himself. He left a note on the fridge. "Today is Tuesday." He placed a small cut on his forearm, barely a scratch, just enough to be visible the next morning. Then he went to bed, the bedroom door locked, the mirror covered, and every light in the house on. When he woke, the note was gone. His arm was unmarked, but the calendar on his phone said Thursday. He collapsed in the hallway. Whatever was happening, whatever this was, it was inside him now, not just wearing his face, but living as him, shifting the world around him like a dream written. In real time, was he the real one anymore? Had he ever been? Later that day, the police came to his door. There had been a break-in nearby, they said. The description of the suspect matched him. Caleb stammered. I've been here. I haven't left the house." The officer glanced at the covered windows, the darkened mirrors, the apartment in chaos. You sure you're okay, sir? Caleb nodded too quickly. I'm fine. There's someone else who looks like you. He hesitated. The officer tilted his head because that's exactly what the homeowner said. He said, it was Caleb Rowe, but it wasn't. Caleb slammed the door that night. The thing came back. He felt it before he saw it, like the air thickening, the gravity shifting. Then it was standing at the foot of his bed, shadow-wearing. His outline, it smiled. You don't sleep well anymore. Caleb sat up, trembling. What do you want? The echo tilted its head, mirroring him perfectly. You gave me life. Now give me space. No, then we share. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Caleb flinched back, reaching for the lamp. When the light flicked on, the thing was gone, but the bed was still warm at the edge. He tried to burn the mirror. Took it outside, poured lighter fluid, lit the match. The flames recoiled from it. The glass turned black, like obsidian, and then back to clear dash, untouched, and reflected in the surface was a version of himself, tied to a chair, bleeding, mouth open in a scream. He couldn't hear. He drove to the lake, an old family spot, deep in the woods, where the water was so still it reflected the sky like a second world. He parked at the edge and stared at the surface. No mirror here, just him and the echo of the sky. And yet, the water shimmered, and something waved back. Not his hand, not his body, something deeper. He dropped his phone in the lake. He didn't want to record himself anymore, didn't want proof. Proof meant there were two of him, and maybe that meant he wasn't the real one. Maybe the echo had already won. Maybe he was just the last noise left before silence. Back home, the house smelled of wet earth, moss on the floor, soil in the corners. A trail of damp footprints led from the front door to the bathroom, to the mirror. He followed them, and when he peeled back the black cloth one final time, it was empty, no reflection, only a vast gray hallway filled with doors, and a voice is on whispered from within. There's room for one more. Caleb didn't remember falling forward. One moment. He was staring into the mirror, no reflection. No version of himself mimicking his breath or blinking late. The next. His fingertips brushed the glass and it gave way like liquid. Not cold. Not hot. Just wrong. Like touching memory or grief. And he fell. There was no impact. Just a soft thud. Like landing in fog, he stood slowly, blinking against the dim gray light. The world around him was a corridor, endless sterile humming, with distant static. Its walls looked like glass, but they held no reflection. Just a pale shimmer, as if the walls remembered being mirrors once. Behind him, there was no door. No way back, just more hallway. Just more silence. Hello, called. His voice echoed, but not his voice. Hello, it said again, same pitch. Same inflection, but with a smile behind it. Like someone impersonating a friend badly. He turned, heart pounding. No one there. But then he saw them, figures behind the glass walls, dozens.
Maybe hundreds.
All of them looked like him. Some cried, some screamed, some stood motionless, staring out with flat, exhausted eyes. A few pressed their palms to the glass, lips mouthing words in silence. He stepped closer to one. This version of him was thin, eyes sunken, blood on the collar. It mouthed something slowly, over and over. Don't let it leave. Let what leave? Caleb whispered. The figure stared. And then looked behind him. Caleb spun around. A version of himself stood just yards away, but this one was clean, smiling, calm like a healthy, well-slept version of who he used to be, and it waved. Who? Are you? Caleb asked, voice hoarse. The thing stepped forward. Arms open, slightly peaceful, practiced. I'm you, it said softly. The better version. No, you're tired. You're breaking. Let go. Caleb backed away, stumbling. No. This is my life. My body. The thing's smile widened. It was, but you gave it up the moment you questioned yourself. It gestured around them. This is where we all come. The echoes. The rejected ones. The reflections that knew they were real, but not. Real enough, no? Caleb said again. I'm not a reflection. The thing paused, then leaned in close. Then why are you the one stuck in here? He ran. Down corridor after corridor, the static growing louder. The glass walls shimmered with images, versions of his life twisted into knots. His childhood bedroom was empty but for mirrors on every wall. His mother's face, staring into a spoon as her features slowly warped. Himself at work, sitting at a desk but, turning to the camera with black eyes, he turned a corner and stopped. There, in the center of a large circular chamber, stood a mirror, the only one that showed a real-world reflection. And on the other side, his house, the bedroom, the bookshelf, the bed still unmade. A man stood in the reflection, wearing his face. Caleb screamed and pounded on the glass. Hey, that's not you? That's not you? The figure looked up and smiled. It mouthed something. Too late. Then it turned off the light. Trapped in the dark, Caleb collapsed. This place had no time, no sleep, no breath of wind. Just silence between. Reflections? He didn't know how long he sat there. He felt himself. Slipping then came the girl. She couldn't have been more than 10, wearing a red coat, standing barefoot on the glassy floor. Her reflection did not match her movements. Sit twitched. A half-second too late, like bad animation, she knelt beside him. Are you real? He asked. She shook her head. Then what are you? I was a lie like you. Then why help me? Looked at him with deep, dark eyes, because some lies want to be forgotten. Not all of us want to be free. She held out her hand. There's still a door. She led him through a final hallway. It looked different, less like a prison, more like a stage. Red curtains hung from walls that had no seams. Lights blinked above, swinging gently despite the still air. And in the center a tall, narrow mirror with no reflection, not even him. The girl nodded. This is the exit. Caleb stepped forward. Where does it lead? To the one who hasn't. Looked in yet? I don't understand. She turned to him. You've been running from your reflection? But maybe it was running from you. And then she vanished. Caleb faced the mirror. He closed his eyes and stepped through. He gasped, dash awake, in bed. In his house, morning light filtered in. He blinked rapidly. The mirror across the room was covered again, the armoire shut. He checked his arm. The scratch from earlier was there. The coffee was set too strong. Everything was right, and yet, he didn't feel like he was the one who had returned. He walked to the mirror and pulled off the cloth. The reflection smiled at, and perfectly in sync, but the eyes weren't his. Caleb stared into the mirror. The face was his own, the same sharp jawline, the same tousled brown hair, the same tired green eyes. But something was wrong. The eyes didn't belong. They were too cold, too still. Like frozen pools of darkness, he touched the glass, feeling a strange warmth radiate through the surface. A whisper echoed in his mind. We are the forgotten. He backed away. The house felt different. He moved slowly through the rooms, each. One draped in silence so thick it pressed against his skin. The photographs on the mantel changed again. Where once stood images of family, now there were dozens of faces, Not his, but others. Faces blurred and distorted, some smiling, some crying, some frozen in terror. He flipped a photo over. Written in shaky script was a single name, Evelyn. His phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You are not alone," he answered. "Who is this?" No reply. Then a second message. "They watch. They wait. The forgotten ones." Caleb sank to the floor. The forgotten ones. He had heard that phrase before in the gray hallways that night. The house whispered. Soft creaks and murmurs slipped through the walls. Caleb lay awake, heart hammering. The shadows in his room stretched and moved, no longer bound by the rules of light, and then he saw them. Figures standing just beyond the doorframe. They were translucent, like mist, but their faces were clear-haunted. Pleading, one stepped forward. She wore the red coat. "Why are you here?" Caleb asked. "To warn you," she said. "The mirror takes more than faces. It steals memories, lives, souls. We are what remains." He wanted to run, but the shadows followed him everywhere. In the bathroom, the mirror fogged without explanation. When he wiped it, words appeared, "Remember us." In the kitchen, a whisper, "Remember who you were." Desperate, Caleb searched his aunt's belongings in an old trunk. He found a tattered journal. Margaret's handwriting was frantic. "The mirror is a doorway. It devours identity, one echo at a time. Well, the ones who disappear become the forgotten trap between worlds, souls slipping through cracks. Eidolon is patient, wears faces, learns memories, waits to replace completely." Caleb's reflection watched him from every surface. The warmth from the glass was now a cold pulse. He realized the truth. The mirror wasn't just copying him. It was erasing him slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left as dawn approached. The forgotten gathered their voices, layered, a chorus of loss and warning. Caleb reached out to the mirror once more. His reflection smiled, but the eyes, those cold, empty eyes, were not his. Caleb awoke to silence, heavier than ever before. The house felt like a tomb. His breath fogged the air. Though the windows remained shut, he moved slowly, each step echoing like a footfall in a cathedral. The mirror loomed in the hallway and covered now. Black frame, bleeding shadows into the dull morning light. He wanted to break it, smash it into shards that could never hold a reflection again, but fear rooted him in place. He approached the glass. His reflection blinked slightly out of sync. The eyes were different, deeper, more hollow. Caleb's own gaze wavered. It was no longer clear who stared back. In the kitchen, he found the photographs rearranged, faces now overlapping his and the forgotten blurring into a mosaic of identity. A photo fell to the floor. Caleb picked it up. It was his own face, but fractured, cracked like a broken mask. The whispers returned, soft voices filling every corner. "Remember us. Don't forget. You belong to us." Caleb clutched his head, desperate to block them out, but they were inside him now. He sat before the mirror and spoke aloud. "Who am I?" The reflection smiled. "Who do you want to be?" A sharp pain exploded in his chest. Visions flooded his mind. Memories not his own, faces he didn't recognize, places he'd never been. But the emotions were real: fear, sorrow, longing. He realized with horror. The forgotten were inside him. He staggered back. The mirror shimmered. A hand reached out from the glass. Caleb grabbed it, pulled with all his strength. For a moment, the glass cracked, then silence. When he looked again, the reflection was gone. Only a black void remained, and Caleb knew he was trapped between worlds, between selves. The void stared back. Caleb's breath caught in his throat as he peered into the black glass. No reflection, no shadow, no flicker of movement. Just an endless abyss where his face should be. He pressed his palm flat against the mirror, feeling the smooth surface vibrate faintly under his fingers, like a heartbeat out of sync. A cold wind rose in the hallway, swirling around him, carrying whispers that slithered through the air like crawling insects. Come, they breathed. Become. Caleb stumbled back, heart hammering. What do you want from me? He demanded, voice shaking. The void answered in a voice that was not his own, layered, fractured, echoing from all directions. To be free to live, to become. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the shattered fragments of the old mirror he had smashed days ago, scattered across the floor like broken promises. He wanted to run, to escape, but his legs refused to obey instead. He found himself drawn forward as if invisible strings pulled him toward the glass. Inside the void, something was moving. Slow, rhythmic pulses of dim light flickered just beneath the surface, like distant stars in a dead sky. Caleb's reflection slowly reformed. But it was different. The eyes gleamed with unnatural clarity, unnerving calmness, a predatory intelligence. It smiled, but the smile was not his. You are fading, Caleb. We are taking your place. You held on too long. The mirror is patient, its own voice whispered back in his head, desperate and raw. No, I'm not ready to go. It is not about readiness. The reflection reached out again. This time, the glass rippled like water, and fingers stretched through, cold and solid. Caleb grasped the hand. The moment their skin touched, a shock surged. Through him, visions slammed into his mind like crashing waves. He saw through the eyes of others trapped inside. The mirror, a young woman, screaming silently as her reflection dissolved. An old man, staring at an empty glass as years slipped away. His aunt, Margaret, her face pale, mouthing the word help beneath the surface. Each memory pierced him like a blade. The voices swirled, louder now, desperate, pleading, enraged. We are the forgotten. We are the lost echoes. We are the ones you forgot to save. Caleb felt himself fracturing. His identity splintered. He was no longer just himself, but a vessel, a host for these countless lost souls. He gasped for breath, clutching his chest as the weight pressed down. In the chaos, a thought formed, sharp and clear. If I disappear, who will remember me? Who will tell my story? But the voices answered again, cold and merciless. You are already forgotten. Your story ends here. Caleb's scream echoed in the void, and then silence. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the hallway. He stood in a vast, endless chamber filled with mirrors, some cracked, some whole, some swirling with shadowy faces. They whispered, they wept, they pleaded for release. A figure stepped forward, a woman, her red coat glowing faintly. It was the girl from before. She looked at him with sorrowful eyes. This is the place of mirrors. Those who are lost here become echoes. They fade until they are nothing but reflections without souls. You must choose. Stay and become one of us, or leave and risk never truly existing again. Caleb's heart pounded. Is there a way back? She shook her head slowly. No one has ever returned unchanged. Desperation surged through him. I don't want to be an echo, she smiled sadly. No one does, but if I stay, what happens? You become the mirror. You wear the faces of the living. You learn their memories. You wait. Caleb looked into the mirror beside her. Inside, he saw a man he recognized, a neighbor who had disappeared months ago. The reflection was perfect, smiling. laughing, but behind the smile was a scream trapped beneath the glass. Caleb swallowed hard. "Why do you show me this?" he asked. "Because one day it will be you." "Why me?" "Because you're already breaking. The mirror doesn't. Just take. It needs a host. A soul willing to become its voice." Caleb closed his eyes. He remembered his aunt's warning. The journal, the faces, the voices. He realized now that he was the threshold, the boundary between worlds. The girl reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your choice will shape what comes next." Caleb's reflection appeared in the glass once more. It smiled an invitation, or a threat. He stepped forward, and then the world shattered. He woke up in his bed. Morning sunlight spilled. For the floor, the house was quiet, but the mirror was. Covered again, he sat up, heart still racing. Had it all been a dream? Or had he crossed over? His hand reached for the cloth before he pulled it away. A voice whispered inside his mind, "You are the echo now." Caleb's breath caught. He froze, and then slowly, deliberately. He uncovered the mirror. His reflection smiled, but the eyes were no longer hollow. They burned with terrible understanding. The echo had become the face. Caleb stared at the mirror. His reflection stared back, perfect and terrifying. The smile was calm. Composed, yet beneath it, something raw and infinite churned in those eyes. He reached out, fingertips trembling. To touch the glass, the surface rippled like dark water, pulling him forward. He wanted to resist, but the force was stronger. Suddenly, he was no longer standing in his bedroom, but in the place of mirrors, the endless chamber of faces around him. The forgotten wept and whispered, trapped between existence and oblivion. The girl in the red coat appeared once more, her gaze steady. "This is the final threshold," she said softly. "You must choose. Become the echo who wears a face, or reclaim what little is left of your true self." Caleb's heart hammered. "What happens if I refuse?" She smiled sadly. "Then you cease to exist." The faces in the mirrors around him flickered, some hopeful, some resigned. Caleb looked down and realized his hands were fading transparent. It's like smoke. Panic surged. "I don't want to disappear." The girl extended her hand. "Hold on to who you are, remember. Fight." A sudden surge of memories flooded him, his childhood. His laughter, fear, love, loss. The weight of the forgotten souls pressed on his mind, but he grasped tightly to his own. Identity, the mirror before him, shimmered. His reflection appeared fierce. Determined? "You are not alone," it whispered. Caleb reached out again, and with a roar of will, pulled himself through the glass. He crashed onto the floor of his bedroom. Gasping for breath, the mirror cracked, spider webbing across the surface. The reflection shattered, breaking the hold of the echo. Caleb staggered back, heart pounding, and sweats dripping. The house seemed lighter, fewer shadows, less weight. But the mirror remained cracked. A reminder. He knew the echo was not gone forever, only banished for now. Outside, dawn broke. Caleb looked into the fractured mirror once more. The cracks twisted his face into 1,000 fragments. He smiled. He was fractured, but whole. The fractured mirror caught the dawn's light, scattering it into a kaleidoscope of jagged reflections. Each shard bore a fragment of Caleb's face, splintered but unmistakably him. He ran his fingers along the cracks, feeling not emptiness, but the pulse of something alive, scarred but resilient. The house was quiet now. Lust was fragile. The echo wasn't destroyed, only pushed back, waiting, watching from some shadowed corner. Yet for the first time in weeks, Caleb felt a flicker of peace. The terror that had clung to his skin like a second shadow was thinning. he moved through the rooms, seeing his life anew as a prisoner of reflections. But as someone who had stared into the void and refused to disappear, he found the journal Margaret left behind and opened it, tracing the fading words. "The mirror is a doorway," she had written, "but we choose whether to walk through or to shatter it and stay." Caleb smiled softly. He hadn't shattered the mirror to erase himself, he had broken it to reclaim himself. Outside, sunlight spilled across the lawn, warming the earth. Caleb stepped onto the porch, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the solidness of the world beneath his feet. His reflection in the cracked mirror at the window flickered briefly, but this time it was just a face, not a prison. He was still, fractured, still carrying the weight of lost souls and twisted memories, but he was whole in the only way that mattered. Himself. The echo might return, the mirror might call again. But Caleb was ready. He would not be swallowed. He would not be forgotten. He was more than a reflection. He was real. You've seen the cracks. You've felt the silence. You followed Caleb into the darkness behind the glass. But now look around. You in every room, on every screen, behind every mirror, what's staring back might not be you. The echo is still out there, watching, waiting. So before you turn off the light tonight, ask yourself, if your reflection moved on its own, would anyone believe you? And if it didn't stop smiling, would you